The silent woman in the corner, the morning sun rose slowly over Palo Alto, painting the sidewalks in golden streaks. The glass doors of the Tesla showroom reflected the light like a portal to another world, a world of polished metal, whispered fortunes and quiet arrogance. Inside, the air hummed with the soft murmur of sales pitches, the smooth rustle of expensive shoes on tiled floors, and the occasional click of a camera as customers posed beside cars most could only dream of owning. In the corner of the room, unnoticed by nearly everyone, stood a woman in a simple cotton sari, a faded cream color with delicate blue patterns. Her sandals were worn, her frame delicate, her hair pulled back in a long braid speckled with strands of gray. She stood still, her eyes scanning the cars in quiet admiration, hands loosely folded in front of her. To anyone watching, she might have seemed out of place, too plain, too silent, too unassuming for such a space of luxury and pride. Her name was Lakshmi. She had flown in from India 2 days ago to visit her son. But Sundar was caught up in back-to-back meetings, boardroom negotiations, and pressing calls from global partners. He had insisted she wait a few more days at his home while he cleared his schedule. But Lakshmi was not one to sit still. She had never liked waiting, not when there were new things to see and lessons to learn. On a whim, she'd asked the house driver to take her to a place she had heard Sundar mention many times over the phone, a Tesla showroom. She didn't know much about electric vehicles, but she had always believed that anything new was worth understanding. She wasn't looking to buy. She was just curious. Yet, from the moment she walked through the doors, the energy changed. Ma'am, can I help you? A young man in a crisp blazer had greeted her at the entrance, eyes flicking from her sandals to her simple gold earrings. I am just looking, she had said softly, her accent unmistakably South Indian. He had smiled tightly and stepped aside, muttering something under his breath that she didn't understand, but felt in her bones. And so she had wandered the showroom alone, pausing in front of each car, reading the specs on digital screens, marveling at the technology she didn't fully grasp. What amazed her was not the cars themselves, but the minds that had built them. She thought of her son, how he had once played with broken radios on the floor of their small home in Chennai, how he had disassembled every clock in the house. Just see how it worked. And now he led one of the world's biggest tech companies. Lakshmi knew what it meant to come from nothing, but here, in this place of shine and status, no one knew who she was. A group of young men stood near a white Model S, laughing loudly. One of them, a tall man with slicked back hair, noticed her watching and called out, "Hey, Auntie." "You lost?" Lakshmi turned and smiled politely. "No, just looking. This isn't a museum, you know. These cars aren't free to touch." His tone wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. She bowed her head slightly and turned away. Meanwhile, across town, Sundar stared at his phone screen, brows furrowed. The driver had sent a message 10 minutes ago. Madam wanted to visit Tesla showroom. Dropped her off. She said she will take Uber back. Sundar's heart skipped. His mother was at the Tesla showroom alone? She hated attention. She hated large crowds. And she definitely didn't like being treated poorly. He stood up from his meeting, ignoring the surprised looks from his executives. "I'll be back," he said, grabbing his coat. Back at the showroom, Lakshmi walked toward the counter near the back. 2 sales associates were chatting and sipping coffee from stainless steel flasks. They didn't look up. "Excuse me," she said softly. One of them glanced up, eyes narrowing as he noticed her. "A tire." "Yes? I was wondering about this car," she said, pointing to a red Model X. He raised an eyebrow. "You mean, you want to know the price?" She nodded. "It's 200,000, give or take, depending on the specs. Fully electric. Autopilot. The works." Lakshmi said, as if considering a grocery list. He chuckled. "We usually handle purchases by appointment, ma'am." "Maybe you want to come back with someone?" Lakshmi tilted her head. "I'm alone." He blinked. "Right." She stood quietly for a moment, then asked, "Can you explain what is autopilot?" He sighed, then waved over his shoulder. "Marcus, give her the standard brochure, would you? I've got to help a real customer." From behind one of the earlier men, Marcus snorted and handed her a pamphlet. She thanked him and stepped aside, flipping through the pages like a student at a new school. Her eyes were sharp, attentive. This was not just about cars. This was about understanding the world her son now moved in. But the whispers had started. What's she doing here? Must be lost. Probably just here to sit in the AC. Lakshmi ignored them all outside. Sundar's car pulled up to the showroom. He stepped out in a black hoodie and jeans, sunglasses pulled low over his nose. He moved quickly, scanning the glass, then stepping through the doors with silent urgency. He saw her instantly, his mother, standing by a pillar. Her figure small and graceful, surrounded by strangers who didn't know her worth. His jaw tightened. Man who had brushed her off earlier was now chatting with a young couple. Animated and loud. Sundar walked past him without a word. He said softly. She looked up and smiled, her eyes brightening. Kanna, you came. He nodded, wrapping his arms around her gently. How long have you been here? Only some time. I was just learning. He looked around, noticing how quiet the showroom had become. Some customers had stopped talking. Others were whispering. Employees glanced back and forth, sensing something they didn't yet understand. Then one of the salesmen, the one who had laughed, took a step forward. Sir, can we help you? Sundar turned to him and took off his sunglasses. The man froze. His smile faltered. Are you ... Yes, Sundar said, calm but firm. And this is my mother. The silence that followed was sharp as glass. Lakshmi reached for his hand. I didn't tell them, Kanna. I didn't think it mattered. Sundar looked at her with warmth and sadness. It shouldn't have to. He turned back to the staff. Tell me, how did you treat her when she walked in? The men shifted uncomfortably. One of them mumbled, we thought she was just ... looking. So we're all your customers, Sundar replied. But only one was treated like she didn't belong. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the air. And then he said something that made every employee stiffen in disbelief. She'll be buying the showroom. There was a gasp. Lakshmi's eyes widened. Kane and Not because. She wants to, Sundar said. But because today, this place needs to learn what real value looks like. And in that moment, no one in that polished room of steel and pride could deny it. The woman they had ignored, dismissed, and quietly mocked had become the most powerful person in the room. Though what would she do next? Asterisk the meaning of worth. Air inside the showroom had changed. What was once filled with quiet laughter and soft arrogance now felt thick with tension. And a hint of shame. Even the lights, bright and sterile moments ago, seemed dimmer, more uncertain. The employees stood stiff like mannequins, their backs straighter, their expressions flickering between disbelief and guilt. A few customers lingered near the back, pretending to look at cars, but their eyes were fixed on the woman in the sari and the man by her side. Lakshmi didn't say anything right away. She looked up at Sundar, her eyes full of questions. You didn't have to come here, she said, gently brushing the edge of her sari as if wiping away the awkwardness. I was fine, but Sundar didn't smile. Not yet. You shouldn't have had to be fine. Not here. Not anywhere. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried weight. And that weight settled on every chest in the room. Then he turned to the young man who had laughed earlier. The one who had dismissed her with a chuckle and a brochure. What's your name? Sundar asked. The man swallowed hard. Nick. Nick, Sundar repeated, almost kindly. How long have you worked here? 8 months, he said, voice barely above a whisper. And in those 8 months, how many customers have you judged by their clothes? Nick didn't answer. Sundar didn't wait. He looked at the manager, next. The older man in the blue tie who had looked through Lakshmi like she was invisible. The one who had waved her off with numbers and told her to come back with someone. What? About you? Sundar asked. Do you remember what you said to my mother? The manager cleared his throat. Sir, I wasn't aware. Aware of what? Sundar cut in, calm, but sharper now. That she mattered? Lakshmi stepped forward. placing a gentle hand on her son's arm. Kana, it's okay. He turned to her, eyes softening immediately. It's not okay. Not for you. Not for anyone. And then he paused. The whole room held its breath. You once told me, Sundar said, that respect isn't something you demand. It's something people reveal about themselves when they think no one is watching. He looked back at the room. Today you revealed a lot. Asterisk, the silence was deep now. Not the kind that happens when people are unsure of what to say, but the kind that happens when they're realizing what they should have said long ago. Lakshmi, ever the calm in the storm, gave a small nod and turned to the nearest car. Sleek. Black model, aye. This one is nice, she said quietly. Very smooth design. Looks like it would move like water. One of the junior staff, young, probably fresh out of college, who hadn't spoken at all, stepped forward nervously. Yes, ma'am, she said, voice careful. It's very efficient. Good range. And safe too. Would you like to see the inside? Lakshmi smiled. Yes, please. And just like that, the energy began to shift again. Not because people were afraid anymore, but because the room had remembered something it had forgotten. Humility. The young woman walked her through the features, explaining how the doors opened automatically, how the dashboard was built for simplicity, how the sound system responded to voice. Lakshmi listened, asked questions, nodded slowly like a teacher studying a new textbook. While they spoke, Sundar stepped aside, pulling out his phone. He wasn't done. Not yet. He called one of his closest partners, someone from his private investment team. Someone who had once said, if you ever want to invest in something just to make a point, I'll make it happen. The call was short by the time he returned to his mother's side. She had just finished testing the passenger seat. It's comfortable, she said, but I like our old ambassador more. Remember? Sundar chuckled. The one that broke down in the middle of the bridge during that rainstorm? Yes, she said, laughing. Your appa had to push it. For a moment, the showroom disappeared. They were back in India, on a wet, crowded street, two young parents and their curious son, surrounded by honking horns and monsoon mist. Back. Then life was harder, but it was honest. A few feet away, the manager approached with a stammering apology. Sir, ma'am, please accept our apologies. We didn't realize who she was. It won't happen again. Lakshmi turned to him, calm as ever. You don't have to know who someone is to treat them well. The manager blinked. You only have to know who you are, she added. And with that, she walked away from him. Hours passed. By late afternoon, the showroom had a different air altogether. People whispered less. They looked more. They listened more. The staff stood straighter, but not out of pride. Out of awareness. Out of a slow-burning realization that perhaps they had learned something today that no sales training could teach. In the private office upstairs, Sundar sat with two lawyers and the investment partner he had called earlier. They were reviewing documents, not to purchase a car, not even to buy one branch, but to secure ownership of the entire location, the land, the rights, the branding for this franchise. Are you sure about this? The lawyer asked. It's going to cause attention. Sundar nodded. Let it. But my mother deserves the kind of respect that can't be faked. And so do others like her. Outside the office window, he could see Lakshmi again. She was now speaking to a young couple first-time visitors who looked unsure about stepping inside. She waved at them, gently coaxing them through the door like a neighbor inviting someone in for chai. They smiled nervously, but followed her. Sundar smiled too. She hadn't changed a bit later that evening. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Sundar and Lakshmi walked out of the showroom together. The staff gathered at the entrance, awkward and silent. Sundar turned to face them. From today, this showroom will run a little differently, he said. You'll learn how to serve with dignity. Not because someone wears a suit, but because every human being is worth. The next person who walks in looking out of place, remember my mother. No one spoke. He nodded once and turned to go, but Lakshmi has always had the last word. Sometimes, she said, her voice gentle, life gives you moments to look in the mirror. This was one of them. Don't waste it. And with that, they left. But that wasn't the end. The next morning, news broke across major platforms. Headlines read, Sundar Pichai buys Tesla showroom. After mother faces subtle discrimination. A lesson in humility. Tech CEO makes bold move to defend dignity. She walked in invisible. She walked out owning the building. People across the world shared their own stories of being dismissed, of being judged, of being underestimated. But one story stood out. A video had gone viral, taken quietly by a customer inside the showroom. In it, Lakshmi was seen speaking softly to a child outside the glass door, giving him a piece of chocolate and telling him, one day you'll build cars like this too. You just need to believe. It melted hearts across the internet, but not everyone was celebrating. Deep within the corporate offices of the franchise's parent company, a few executives were furious. This wasn't just a local issue now. This was public. This was political. And it had drawn the attention of Tesla's top brass. Someone high up made a phone call. Someone else scheduled a flight. Someone said, we need to talk to him now. Just like that, what started as a quiet visit by a silent woman was turning into something bigger than anyone could have imagined. But what would happen when the call reached Elon Musk himself? Asterisk, the call that shook Silicon Valley the next morning. Began with silence, not the peaceful kind. The kind that hums in the air before a storm, thick with tension and unsaid words. Inside the top floors of a glass building overlooking the San Francisco Bay. 3 men stood around a large screen, watching a video loop for the third time. It was the now viral footage of Lakshmi gently helping a young couple understand the functions of a Tesla vehicle after the showroom staff had all but ignored her. She looked so peaceful, so warm, so dignified. Yet this simple act had ignited a wildfire. The man at the center of the room, lean with silver hair and sharp eyes, finally spoke. We've had product recalls, bad press, manufacturing delays, but nothing has caused this kind of outrage. His assistant nodded. The engagement on this video is unbelievable. Over 60 million views in under 24 hours. The story's being translated into Chinese, Spanish, Hindi, and what's the sentiment? The executive interrupted, 98% positive, for Sundar and his mother. The room fell silent again. The problem wasn't Sundar. The problem was how it all looked for them. Corporate discrimination, cultural ignorance, and worse. Arrogance. Get me Elon, the man said, finally. Now, thousands of miles away, Sundar sat at the breakfast table, slowly stirring a cup of cardamom tea his mother had made just moments earlier. The sunlight streamed through the windows of his home, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. Lakshmi sat across from him, humming a soft old Tamil lullaby to herself as she sliced fresh fruit. He had spent most of the night thinking about everything that had happened. Not just the incident, the showroom, but the chain of reactions that followed. Part of him had expected a stir, maybe a few tweets, some media attention. But not this. He glanced at his phone again. Over 100 messages from journalists, tech leaders, community activists, even a few politicians. Everyone wanted a comment, a quote, a statement, but he hadn't said anything yet. His mother looked up from the fruit bowl. You're not eating, Kenna. I am thinking, Sundar said, with a small smile. Thinking doesn't feed the stomach, she said. He chuckled softly. But before he could respond, his phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a text. It was a direct call. Unknown number. He answered. Sundar, came a voice, low and direct. It's Elon. There was a pause. Sundar straightened in his chair. Hey, he said. I figured I'd hear from you. We need to talk. In person. That serious? It's not just about the showroom anymore, Elon replied. It's about what the world thinks this means. You mean people seeing the truth? Sundar asked calmly. Another pause. Come to my office, Elon said. By noon, Sundar was on his way to the Tesla headquarters in Palo Alto. He didn't wear a suit. No tie. Just a dark sweater, slacks, and quiet resolve. When he arrived, A secretary ushered him past the usual corridors and into a small private conference room overlooking the production facility. Machines hummed in the distance. Below, robotic arms assembled frames with elegant precision. It was a world built on logic and technology. But this meeting wasn't about either. Elon entered moments later. His expression was unreadable. They sat across from each other. I watched the footage. Elon began. I assumed you would, Sundar replied. You buying the showroom was unexpected. Sundar folded his hands. What happened to my mother was also unexpected. Elon leaned back. You do realize how this looks? Asterisk, yes, Sundar said. It looks like a wake-up call. There was a long silence between them. Two titans of industry. Two immigrants who had fought their way to the top of the world. But in this moment, they weren't speaking as CEOs. They were speaking as sons. She didn't want anything, Sundar said finally. Not attention. Not revenge. She just wanted to understand something new. And instead, she was made to feel small. Elon looked out the window. The silence stretching. I've seen people judged, Sundar continued, for their accent, for their skin, for how they dress. I've lived through it. But watching it happen to my mother, right here, in a place that's supposed to represent the future, it broke something. Elon tapped his fingers on the table. I'm not defending what happened, he said. But you could have handled it quietly. Sundar met his eyes. And who would have changed then? The question lingered in the air. Outside the class. A spark flew from one of the machines, flaring bright before disappearing again. Finally, Elon sighed. So, what do you want? Reform, Sundar said. Not in press releases. In practice. Specifics. Training. Programs. Hiring policies. Cultural literacy. You can't claim to build the future if you don't understand the world. Elon raised an eyebrow. And you think one incident will spark that? Sundar gave a small smile. I think the world is already listening, and it's up to us whether we speak with honesty or spin. Elon leaned back again, studying him. You've changed since the last time we met. Motherhood changes you, Sundar said, even when you're not the mother. That drew a small laugh from Elon, more breath than sound. He stood. All right. We'll talk again. Soon. We will? Sundar replied, rising to leave. Back at Sundar's home, Lakshmi sat on the back patio with a notebook in hand. She was writing something in Tamil. Slow, neat script. Memories, perhaps? Or maybe reflections from the last few days. Occasionally she paused to sip her tea or look at the flowers swaying in the breeze. When Sundar returned, she looked up and smiled. How was the meeting? She asked. Respectful, he said, sitting beside her. And needed, she nodded. You spoke your truth? I did. She didn't ask for details. She didn't need to dot, then she handed him the notebook. Read this when you're alone. What is it? My story, she said simply. He opened it to the first page. It read, This is the story of a woman they could not see, and how she taught them to open their eyes. His eyes misted over. That evening, as the world outside debated corporate ethics, social justice, and the meaning of progress, inside a quiet home in Palo Alto, a mother and her son shared a simple dinner. Dal, rice, papadum, and peas. But far away in an office where big decisions are made. Another conversation was happening. A board meeting. A question raised. What happens? One executive asked if more people like her walk into our showrooms. And the answer came from the only woman in the room. Then maybe we'll finally learn who really deserves to be behind the wheel. But what would Lakshmi do next when a letter arrived inviting her to speak at a global tech summit? Asterisk, the unexpected. Invitations morning after the storm. Everything seemed to settle, but not in the way people expected. In the quiet stillness of Sundar's home. Lakshmi walked barefoot across the smooth marble floor, her cotton sari brushing softly against her ankles. The world outside was buzzing louder than ever. News anchors still discussing her visit to the showroom. Op-eds praising her grace, even late-night comedians jokingly offering her the CEO seat. But inside, she moved like always, unhurried, grounded, unaffected by noise. Yet something shifted that morning, as she prepared to step outside and water the small basil plant in the garden. A quiet knock came at the door. Not the usual hard, hurried one of delivery men or assistants. This one was soft, respectful, almost hesitant. Sundar, still in his pajamas, answered. A young woman in a gray uniform stood holding an envelope. No packages, no media kits, just a single, elegant envelope with a gold seal. She handed it over with both hands and bowed slightly. "For Miss Lakshmi," she said simply. Sundar raised an eyebrow, but took it. He closed the door and turned to find his mother already drying her hands. "Someone sent you a letter," he said, holding it out. Lakshmi tilted her head, a little amused. In this world of emails and video calls, a letter? A very fancy one, Sundar added. She took it gently, as if it might break. Opening the seal slowly, she pulled out a thick card printed with clean, embossed text. Her eyes scanned it. Once, then again. She blinked and looked up at her son. "They want me to speak," she said softly. "Speak?" Sundar asked. "Where?" She handed him the card. He read it aloud. "The World Innovators Summit. Keynote guest. Your presence would honor our vision for a more inclusive future." He looked up in disbelief. "They want you to be their keynote speaker?" Lakshmi sat down, the letter resting in her lap. Like a strange weight. "I think they do." Sundar sat beside her, his brows furrowed in concern. Double quotes. This is a global platform. They usually have presidents, scientists, billionaires, and now they want a retired school teacher from Chennai, she said, a smile tugging at her lips. "Are you going to say yes?" Yes. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out the window at the hummingbirds near the flowers. "When I was a little girl," she said slowly, "I stood outside a temple once, watching a priest chant prayers. I couldn't go inside. It wasn't allowed for girls. Back then, in our village, I remember asking my mother, when will they let us speak too? And she said, only when we stop waiting for permission." Her voice softened. "Maybe this is not about me. Maybe this is about what happens when someone like me finally speaks." Sundar was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Then we'll make it happen." The weeks that followed were a blur. Speech coaches offered their services. Wardrobe stylists sent fabric samples. Global media requested interviews. But Lakshmi insisted on doing things her way. No stylists. No rehearsed speeches. Just her thoughts, her sorry, and her voice. Meanwhile, across Silicon Valley, powerful rooms buzzed with new conversations. A tech panel in San Jose added a new session, honoring quiet wisdom, lessons from Lakshmi. A startup incubator began offering unconscious bias training, citing the Lakshmi incident as its foundation. And in classrooms across India, teachers used her story as an example of resilience, humility, and people who weren't just inspired. They were beginning to change. On the day of the summit, the grand hall was a sea of elegant glass walls, silver chairs, giant screens, flashing logos of the biggest tech companies on earth. High-ranking officials, investors, scientists, and thought leaders filled the seats, some chatting excitedly, others typing notes. And backstage, Lakshmi sat on a simple chair, adjusting the end of her sari. She wore the same cream one from the day that the showroom cleaned and ironed, but unchanged. Her hair was in a neat braid. No makeup, no ornaments, no speeches pinned to her blouse. Just her. Sundar stood nearby, arms crossed, watching the stage team scramble to fit last minute. Wires and test microphones. "Are you nervous?" he asked. "No," she said. "I'm just remembering your first day of school." He chuckled. This isn't the same." "It is," she said. "You were scared. I told you to walk in with your chin up, even if your shoes were torn." She looked up at him, eyes shining. "Your shoes are fine now. But never forget how to walk." Before he could reply, someone called her name. "Miss Lakshmi." It's time. She stood, not with nerves, but with purpose. As she stepped onto the stage, the audience fell silent. A few glanced around, unsure. Others straightened in their seats. And when she reached the podium, the lights dimmed. She adjusted the microphone, looked at the sea of expectant faces. Then she began. I was not born into wealth, she said calmly. Not into power. Not into intent that makes a person noticeable in this kind of room. A few people leaned in. I was born in a village where electricity was rare, where water came from a pump, where girls were told to stay silent and small. She paused, but silence taught me how to listen, and being small taught me how to see what others miss. The room grew quieter. Last month, I walked into a car showroom. I didn't go to buy. I went to learn. And in that place, beautiful, shiny, and proud people looked at me as if I didn't belong. A ripple of recognition moved through the audience. But what is belonging? She asked. Is it money? Accent? Clothes? She looked around. I raised my son not with money, but with belief. Belief that he could dream beyond the lines drawn around us. Belief that kindness was a strength. Belief that no job, no title, no company would ever matter more than how you treat people. A few claps began, then quieted. Today, I stand here not as a CEO or a leader. I stand as a mother, a teacher, a woman who was ignored and still smiled. She took a deep breath. I am not here to shame anyone. I am here to remind you that in all your code and wires and algorithms, don't forget the human being. Now the claps grew louder, because technology changes fast. But humility? That is eternal? A standing ovation erupted before she could say another word. People rose to their feet, not because she dazzled them, but because she touched something real. And backstage, Sundar stood frozen. His heart pounding. She had done it. Not just spoken. She had stirred something in the hearts of people who believed they had heard it all. That night, as they sat in the car driving home, Lakshmi rested her head against the seat. Did I speak okay? She asked. Emma, Sundar whispered. You changed the room. She smiled and closed her eyes. But the story wasn't done. For far away. Across the ocean, a young girl in a rural village watched the speech on her father's old phone. She wore hand-me-down clothes and braided hair just like Lakshmi once did. And as she watched, something shifted in her. She turned to her father and said, one day I'll speak like that. And just like that, a new story had begun. But what will happen when someone from Sundar's past appears claiming to have known Lakshmi in a way no one expected? Asterisk the visitor from the shadows the morning after the summit. Sundar's home was filled with fresh flowers, bouquets from dignitaries, arrangements from tech founders, handwritten notes from young girls around the world. One letter, written in uneven English on ruled notebook paper, simply said, Dear Amma Lakshmi, I saw. You speak? I told my teacher I want to be like you. She smiled and said, You already are. Lakshmi had read every single one. She sat on the floor cross-legged, surrounded by the blooms, carefully folding each note and placing them in a small wooden box beside her. She didn't do it for attention. She did it because words mattered to her. Stories mattered, especially the ones that came from unheard voices. Asterisk. But just as she was placing the last letter into the box, the doorbell rang. Not once. But 3 times. Quick, sharp, urgent. Sundar was still upstairs on a call. The housekeeper had gone to the market. So Lakshmi opened the door herself, and there he was. An old man, leaning on a cane, wearing a beige cap and a kurta that looked too heavy for the warm California weather. His face was lined, his skin weathered, his eyes sunken, but alert, hauntingly familiar. Lakshmi's breath caught in her chest. He didn't speak at first. He simply looked at her with a strange mix of sorrow and awe. Lakshmi, he finally whispered, it's really you. Lakshmi's hand trembled against the doorframe. Her voice came out softer than she intended. Murugan? He nodded. Sundar, now descending the staircase with a cup of tea in hand, paused mid-step. when he saw the expression on his mother's face. Everything okay? She didn't answer immediately. Then, without turning her head, she said quietly, "This is Murugan. We were childhood friends." Murugan took a deep breath. More than friends. A silence swept through the doorway. Sundar stepped forward, placing the tea down on a nearby table. "Please come in." They led him to the drawing room. The space was quiet, except for the ticking of the wall clock and the occasional distant bark of a neighborhood dog. Murugan sat slowly, his cane resting against the arm of the couch. Lakshmi sat across from him, back straight, eyes unreadable. "I watched your speech," Murugan said finally. "I couldn't believe it at first. I thought, no, not my Lakshmi. She wouldn't be there. Not on a stage like that. But when you spoke, I knew." Sundar glanced between them, unsure if he should stay or excuse himself. Murugan noticed his hesitation. "You can stay, Sundar. This is part of your story too." Lakshmi looked down at her hands. Her fingers laced together tightly. "It's been more than 50 years, she said. "Why now?" Murugan let out a quiet sigh. "Because I have little time left. And because some truths wait too long in the shadows." Sundar leaned forward gently. "What truths?" Murugan looked at him, with eyes full of both guilt and love. "Your mother and I. We were supposed to be married." The words landed like a stone in the room. Lakshmi closed her eyes. Murugan continued. "It was all arranged. Families agreed. Dates set. But then my family moved to Sri Lanka for work. We were supposed to return within the year. But the war broke out. Borders closed. Letters stopped coming. And she thought I had died." Lakshmi opened her eyes. Her voice was low, but for years, I waited. Every week, I walked to the post office. No letters, only silence. And when your brother died, I knew I had to move forward. Your father came into my life then. He was kind, patient, and he didn't ask me to forget, only to begin again." Murugan nodded slowly. "I heard about his death years later. I wanted to reach out. But I didn't want to disrupt your life. I had no right." "You still don't," Lakshmi said, but there was no anger, only quiet pain. Murugan lowered his gaze. "I just I wanted to see you one last time. To tell you that I never stopped carrying you in my heart. Even when the world made me forget everything else." A deep hush settled over the room. Sundar sat back, absorbing it all. He had always known his mother to be strong, steady, immovable. But this was a chapter of her life he had never imagined. A woman loved. A woman left behind. A woman who rebuilt herself from heartbreak. Lakshmi stood up slowly, walked to the window. Outside, the wind danced through the garden, shaking the jasmine petals. "Murugan," she said gently, "you did not come too late. You came when the world had finally given me my voice. And maybe you needed to hear it too." He nodded, tears filling his tired eyes. Then, without a word, she turned and walked to the hallway closet. She opened a small box and returned with an old photograph, faded and curled at the edges. It showed 2 children, no older than 8, sitting by a riverbank. The girl's braid was long. The boy's knees were scraped. Both smiling. Fearless. She handed it to him. "Take this," she said. "It's proof that we once existed in." World untouched by pain, Murugan held the photo to his chest. For a long time, no one spoke. Finally, he stood. "Thank you," he said. "For remembering me." Lakshmi smiled. "Thank you for not letting me forget." He turned to Sundar and reached for his hand. "Your mother, is the strongest person I've ever known. Take care of her." Sundar nodded, his throat tight. And just like that, Murugan left. That night, Sundar sat beside Lakshmi in the garden, the stars blinking softly above them. "Never knew," he said. "Some stories," she replied, "are not secrets. They're just waiting for the right moment to be told." He looked at her profile, serene, wise, quiet as ever. Yet beneath that calm exterior lay a life full of depth, of silent sacrifices, of buried dreams. and quiet victories. Do you regret it? He asked. No, she said. Because every choice led me here, to you, to this garden, to today. He rested his head against her shoulder. Sometimes, she whispered, a closed door is just life's way of turning us to a different path. Not worse, just different. And in that quiet moment under the night sky, Sundar realized something profound. His mother was not just a woman who raised a tech genius. She was a story that hadn't yet finished telling itself. But what happens when her story reaches the ears of the next generation, sparking a movement no one saw coming? Asterisk, the legacy begins. Weeks that followed were unlike anything Lakshmi had ever imagined, not because of the media coverage, not because of the viral videos or invitations to awards galas, and not even because Elon Musk himself had posted a personal message calling her a reminder that real progress begins with listening to the invisible. No, what surprised Lakshmi most was the silence that came after all the noise. Not the kind of silence that followed her in the showroom weeks ago, cold and dismissive, but the gentle kind. The kind that wraps itself around you after you've said something you were always afraid to say. It was a silence filled with reverence. Silence filled with promise. And in that silence, something new began to grow. It started small. An email from a young Indian woman studying in Sweden. She said she was the only girl in her mechanical engineering program. She had watched Lakshmi's speech with tears in her eyes. She wrote, "My professor once asked me what a girl from a village knew about machines. Today, I sent him your speech." Then came a message from a former Tesla employee. He had resigned quietly 2 years ago after being passed over repeatedly for promotion. He wrote, "Your visit reminded me that staying silent helps no one. I'm starting my own company. Now. And our first hire will be someone others overlook." One by one, the messages poured in. From Africa, from the Philippines, from small towns in Argentina and crowded rooftops in Bangladesh. People who had never heard of Lakshmi Pichai before now called her Amma. A mother not just to Sundar, but to an entire generation hungry for quiet power, for kindness with a spine, for wisdom that didn't wear a suit. But what none of them knew, what even Sundar didn't know, was that Lakshmi had quietly begun something new. Early one morning, before the sun had fully risen, she sat cross-legged on the floor, with an old notebook and a silver pen. The walls were still, the garden, barely awake, but her heart raced. Because this wasn't just any notebook. It was the first entry of a foundation. She was creating. Not in her name, not in Sundar's, but in the name of countless unnamed women who had raised scientists, leaders, artists, dreamers without anyone ever knowing their names, the invisible mothers. Foundation. Its mission was simple. To fund education for girls from rural communities. To offer mentorship for women who had never used a computer but knew how to lead. To provide small loans for mothers who wanted to start tiny businesses that would keep food on their children's plates. And most importantly, to tell their stories. Lakshmi knew that the world didn't change through technology alone. It changed through narrative, through memory, through the sacred power of being seen. So she began writing every morning. Sometimes a paragraph, sometimes pages. Stories of the women she had known. The ones who had stitched clothes by candlelight. The ones who had sold vegetables with babies on their hips. The ones who had made the impossible look ordinary. She wrote them all down. And with each story, the foundation grew. Sundar, when he found out weeks later, was stunned. Double quotes, he said, looking at the papers on the dining table. "You started all of this without telling me?" She smiled. "Kana, I raised you to lead, not to wait for permission." He laughed, shaking his head. "How did you plan to run all this by yourself?" "Who said I'm alone?" she replied. "You think women survive this world alone?" "We've always had each other." She handed him a folder. "These are the women who've joined already. From Chennai, from Lucknow, from Ethiopia, from Colombia. They'd been waiting for something like this. Not a charity, not pity, just a beginning. Sundar flipped through the names, the faces, the letters. He had stood on some of the biggest stages in the world, but he had never felt pride like this. Soon, global media took notice again. But this time, Lakshmi didn't become the story. The women did. A short film was made, following the life of a young girl in Rajasthan who received her first laptop through the foundation. It showed her waking up at 4 a.m. to fetch water, then attending an online class under a neem tree. The final shot showed her whispering into the camera, "One day, I'll build machines that make life easier for Amma." The film went viral. Universities reached out, offering scholarships,